Facebook family. I am Tamara Johnson Shealy, candidate for Senate District 40. And of course, I'm hanging out with my friend David and our friend Samson. We always have the most candid conversations, y'all. So we wanted to include you in. And today we're talking about North DeKalb and South DeKalb. It is a conversation that I think we need to continue to have until we bridge the divide between North DeKalb and South DeKalb. What y'all think?
I agree.
I agree too. So we have to keep talking. We have to make sure that we address the issues that affect all of us. And this line that divides us, economic, racial, we need to bridge that divide. And we need to talk about what divides us in North DeKalb and South DeKalb, and talk about how we build a better DeKalb and a one DeKalb. Right?
I agree.
All right.
I agree.
All right. Well, today we're going to talk about race relations. Bring it on. You know, David always has all the history.
Well, I would point out, just start out with that that there is a new evaluation of Democratic polling that's taken place, or Democratic public opinion polling, and it was done by a very highly regarded Democratic pollster named Celinda Lake, and she says that that Democrats are better off talking about race than trying to ignore it.
Ooh.
They actually win more elections if they address racial issues up front and directly, rather than try to avoid them. And that's becoming really an important consideration, both for the primary and for the general election. We got to talk about race. We got to talk about our relations among ourselves if we're going to be able to overcome the whatever you want to call it, the white nationalism, you know, that is becoming a direct and open appeal of the Republican Party, which has essentially become, you know, I don't know if you're going to agree with me about this, Samson, but you know, essentially has become a white nationalist party, you know, and so we're really left with no choice but to address the issue of race, because it's already out there.
And my thing is, why is it so hard? Like, I talk about it, and when I talk about it, I don't think that, you know, I don't understand why it's so hard. Why is it so hard to talk about race? Why does it make people uncomfortable?
Well, and I gotta go back to what David just said. I do think Democrats have a better advantage as far as talking about race, because if you look at the history of the parties, Republicans versus Democrats, Republicans tend not to talk about race. They want to talk about economics. They want to talk about how less government, things of that nature. I do believe that for years, Democrats used the race to win many elections, because blacks feel that they were left out or disenfranchised. And they, especially, okay, so let's go back some history. If you go back during the 80s and the 90s, a lot of Democrats that they ran somewhat trying to appease to the African American community, because they knew that was a vote, a sure vote. But if we go back even farther, so this is a history lesson. Republicans originally were the icebreakers of trying to deal with race and relations. But as time go on and people have different ideology of race and economics and how the system works, we tend to get away from that. And in many years, Republicans have gotten away from race. Because why? It's not a sure thing for them to win. It is not a sure victory for Republicans to talk about race. Why? Because their base, if you look at their base, 20, 30, 40 years ago, it consists of white, middle class, to upper class people. So they tend to cater to those individuals who they feel are the base of their party. Also in that group for many years were white women. White women were white women, or I'm gonna say women in general, but especially white women, are the voting power in this country. If you look at how they vote, they are the voting power in this country.
But Black women are carrying the Democratic
Well,
Party.
right. That's why. So that's why I say I'm gonna say women in general.
Okay.
Let's just say women in general. They are the voting power in this country. So once a particular group gets behind, especially a woman, then that is a for sure win for that candidate. And I'll go back to the Barack Obama era when he first ran. If you looked at how people voted, women outnumbered men 4-1 that in that voting power. So when you look at the voting power as far as the structure is concerned, yes, it is more reasonable for Democrats to talk about race than it is.
I would challenge you on a couple of these issues, Samson. One of them is that I think we've kind of I think there's been pretty much an agreement that there really isn't much of a gender gap. That what we have is actually that Black women vote overwhelmingly Democratic, like 95%. And there are many, many more Black women that are voting than Black men, because Black men have been cut out of the system, either by the
judicial system,
the felon,
or just don't want to vote,
or are just dislocated,
correct,
in many ways besides just the felony exclusions. So when you look at the gender gap, it's really that Black women are that white women are voting more or less with Democrats, Republicans, more or less even, and then it's the Black women that are skewing that are creating the gender gap. So that's one part of the story that I think we really need to kind of refine when we're talking about those issues. The other thing is that I think that you're absolutely right that the Democrats in the 80s and 90s were able to count on the Black vote as very, very reliable. They also took black voters for granted.
Oh yeah, that's true.
I want y'all to talk to the audience.
Oh, I'm sorry.
They're having a conversation, y'all. We're gonna turn this around and we're gonna talk to you guys. Yeah, they get all in, guys. They go all in.
I think that's one of the things that has begun to stop happening. I'll look at Samson in the.
Okay, I'm looking at you, David.
I think that's one of the things that has begun to change very, very much, very prominently in the recent elections, starting in 2016, probably even before that, but 2016 and down to today. Black people and Hispanics and people of color in general are saying you can't take our vote for granted anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the reasons why you have at least how many Black women are running in Georgia this for 2018. I mean, Stacey Abrams and you and
Lucy McBath,
and
Donna McLeod, Josh and O'Neill. There's a lot of women,
So
Black
there's-
women on the
there's a lot
ballot.
of Black women on the ballot,
Yes.
and the reason for it is,
Shelley Hutchinson. I'm making sure I'm not forgetting anybody. There's a lot of Black women
Yeah.
on the ballot.
and the reason for it is that you guys are tired of being the workhorses of campaigns and getting out the vote
Mhm.
and doing all that other stuff, and then your voices are disregarded when it comes to, because the Democrats are playing to the center rather than
To the base.
to the base,
Yes.
and the base in this case means really working people
Mhm.
who are virtually excluded from the decision-making process in the country, whoever gets elected.
Yeah.
So, and then that's something we really need to talk about. It's just how much working people are not represented in the,
and it's the base of the Democratic Party. So how can you, that's the part that confuses me, so that they sway towards these people that this is not where they fit.
Well, that has to do with things like the stuff that we know about who pays for election campaigns.
Who yes.
finances election campaigns.
Yes.
Election campaigns are financed almost exclusively, almost 100% by people in the top 20% of the income level in the United States. So if that's the case, and campaign financing, and we're not even talking about the issue of corporate financing and the financing by billionaires. We really need to keep in mind that those billionaires, who run the two major parties are really supported by a base of people who are making $120,000 plus a year.
We're gonna stay on race though.
Yeah. But the reason
this conversation,
it has to do with race.
Yeah.
Because so few of those people are people of color.
Yeah, exactly. You know what, I found that when it comes to, race and, a lot of the people that you really want to represent really don't have the resources to support a campaign.
Yeah. And or either in terms of money or time.
Because they're working all the time, and then they really just don't have the money to put out to put anything additional.
So that really becomes an issue, Samson, for because the other part of it is that white working class people tend to vote, if they vote at all, they tend to vote for Republicans.
Yeah. He says here, we also need to bridge the gap between North DeKalb and South DeKalb about getting out to the voters about voting. Absolutely. There needs to be a more concentrated and intentional effort to talking to all of DeKalb. And you know what, that goes back a lot to the party. Inside of the party, those dynamics exist. Race is a huge issue. There's this white DeKalb, and then there's this black DeKalb, when we really should be focused on bridging DeKalb and being one DeKalb. That's party politics and just politics in the county as a whole.
And I would say partly that what we're seeing here is when you say, why is it so difficult to talk about race?
Yeah, why?
It's not difficult for Black people and other people of color to talk about race. The people who have the problem talking about race are white folks.
I want to jump in on a couple of issues that you brought up. Going back, and you are correct, when we look at how Democrats have capitalized on the African American vote, and I think they did a good job because they brought up issues in which they thought were relevant to African Americans, and they ran on those issues. And of course, we responded. I think as we have gotten into this new age, the Democrats have once again missed the ball because now those issues have changed. And so the technique that they used in the 80s and 90s does not necessarily work today. So of course, and if you don't refine your craft, you tend to lose people, and
it's dated. It's
right.
The process is dated.
True. Yeah. Also, but then when it comes to the African American people, we have to stop making an excuse. We are quick to say, I gotta do this, I gotta do A, I gotta do B, I gotta do C, I don't have time for this, I don't have time for this. So when you don't make time for the issues, how do you expect for someone to address the issue?
Yeah.
When you don't make time and say, well, I need to prioritize and see what's important to me and my family, and how this is illustrated into your platform as a candidate. We don't do that. We laxy-daisy go about our lives, and we don't do something until something happens. And then when it happens to us, how come? Well, we have to once again put ourselves in the realm of getting information. And if you don't do that, then expect to be behind. I want to bring up something else in that topic. I was recently in a discussion with some people, and we were talking about high school students. And I said, it's amazing how a week or so ago you had all these young high school students across the country that went to DC for a protest about gun rights. But blacks can't get together, let's call it African Americans. They can't get together and get an agenda and present to their elected officials or candidates, this is what we want in our community. So what does that tell you? That tells you that, once again, we can blame the system, we can blame the parties, we can blame Patty baked the cake wrong, but if we don't take some responsibility, and that means going out getting information, that means forming an organization, and we have to get up and stand up and stay standing up and not get tired of standing up.
So see, our conversations in these broadcasts are not one-sided. And that's why I'm so glad to have Samson, and I'm so glad to have my friend David. Because we don't just call, it ain't just about addressing the problem that white people have, but it's about addressing the problem that black people have. We have a problem as a people. And once we start to address it culturally, like I told David, just on a joke, I told David, he came in today, David is always late. I love David, but David's gonna be late. So I said to David, David, you're on CP time. So this is how, to me, when we have these conversations, we have to be candid, we have to be honest. And guess what? We really have to kind of laugh about some of this stuff and not take it so personal. It is not an attack on David or on me if I say to David, CP time. Those of you who don't know, it's color people time. We have our own schedule, right, our own clock that we run by.
And that's not necessarily good, because if we refer to color people time, it's always late.
Yeah, that's the bad part.
Now, if you're always late, how do you expect to be caught up with everyone else?
Yeah.
And that's the issue I wanted to point out when I saw or heard the report about all them young people going to Washington in masses to say, hey, you got to do something about gun violence. And then I'm thinking, why are we not getting together in the masses to do something?
Well, Black Lives Matter has tried. And I actually, I was in Arizona a couple years back, and I actually was there when they protested Bernie Sanders, when they literally shut him down, he and O'Malley, when they were both running for president. And after that protest was over, I found one of the leaders, and she and I had an opportunity to talk. And I asked her, now that you've done this demonstration, on the piggybacking on what you're saying, now that you've done this demonstration, now what? And there was no agenda.
Right.
There was no agenda. So you're absolutely correct that we need to be very clear about what needs to happen in our communities and communities of color. And it's not just, that ain't white people's fault. That's Black people's fault. See, we call it like it is.
Right, and I like that, because once again, once you have, and I would go back to the Black Lives Matter. Me personally, I think it is a good movement.
Absolutely,
because,
I do too. And I support them.
Let me make this clear, because I don't want anybody to misconstrue about this.
You don't want anybody to throw shade, David. Samson.
I believe that all lives matter. I do believe that.
But right now,
and I do believe that Black Lives Matter, because for so long, the history of this country says it doesn't. Not my history, the country's history of this says it doesn't. Mm-hmm. And we just witnessed that recently in the killing of that boy out in Sacramento. So for individuals that say, well, all lives matter, you are correct. But let's look, if we're going to look at issues and discuss them openly and honestly, let's look at the history, because in order to move forward, we have to address history as it is and try not to repeat it. And in order to not repeat it, we must acknowledge what has happened and try to find solutions to move forward.
Right, David?
Well, I think that there's been a tremendous amount of activism in the Black community, much more so than in the white community, I think. So I'm not really convinced that this is simply a matter of social, of personal, Black people taking personal responsibility. We've had this conversation before. The relationship between personal responsibility and responsiveness of institutions is really what we're talking about. The institutions do not respond to Black people the way that they respond to whites. And so therefore, the whole nature of representative government in this country is skewed so that it's really not a right to representative government. It's actually a racial privilege to representative government. You have community control of the police in wealthy, suburban, mostly white areas. The police are under the control of the community. And I just give you a historical example. New York City, for decades and decades, had a rule that said, they imposed a rule after the civil rights movement that police officers had to live in the city of New York in order to be police officers. And the Patrolmen's Benevolent Association, the Fraternal Order of Police, found all sorts of ways to change that rule so that police officers could live on Long Island in really white communities or in parts of Queens that were overwhelmingly white. And so you had this perception of the police when they were still overwhelmingly white in the 60s, 70s, and even into the 80s. That the police who came into Black communities were an occupying army. They were an occupying force, and the PBA, the Patrolmen's Benevolent Association, and other predominantly white influential mass organizations in New York City, predominantly white, were able to block community control efforts when they were brought up by people of color who felt that they were being occupied and that there was no accountability for the police. So all of this stuff that's happening now, nowadays in the last 3-4 years, we're talking about the Black Lives Matter movement as a response. This really goes back decades and decades and decades, and the idea that the police are an occupying army in a Black community is really nothing new. So why is it that in the face of all of that movement, organizing and protesting and everything that this biggest city in the United States could not find a way to solve the issue of having some responsibility, accountability of the police force?
And that's not just New York, that's here. That's here
everywhere.
in DeKalb County,
Yeah.
That's everywhere. That's what the gentleman on the screen just said. This county is divided, period. We need to acknowledge the divide. I actually started a Facebook group a page called Acknowledge the Divide. And I think when we start to see the examples of the divide, we can acknowledge it, we can mend it, and we can move on. And it is social, the system itself. It is the system. But we as a people have to take some personal accountability. Like, I'm not going to let us off the hook, right? And that's not what you're not letting us off the hook.
Dave, that was a good point. I like that. But I want to add to that point. It seems that every group of people in this country knows their strength except African Americans. So let me bring you all up to speed. There was a movie that recently came out, the Black movie.
Black Panther.
Black Panther.
Wakanda forever.
Yeah. And
David hadn't seen it yet.
No,
David, do you?
I
Y'all. I should take David to the movies and see this, right? Well,
So-
he'll be walking around like this.
so the movie made record box office sales,
Yeah.
records, and of course, a lot of places recorded the people that were going to the movies. And you
Yes,
saw a lot of African Americans that helped make that a rocket sale.
I know where he's going.
And so when I read about that and I hear about that, something else comes to mind. And I'm gonna put these two things together. If someone said, Mr. Burrell, how do we do a race issue in the country, in the county, in the cities, in the suburbs? You have in this country, let's say 90% of businesses, corporations, sports events are owned by white people. Let's just say that, a large majority. So let's say for the NFL and the NBA, the majority of the owners are white.
All the owners are white.
All the owners are white. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're in agreement with that.
True.
And 92% or whatever are black players that play on those teams.
Mhm.
Now you have people in the community who have, like myself, they go to movies and spend money on movies. So once again, there's a buying power. Well, you must say, well, where are you trying to go? Give me a second.
Yeah, Mr. Burrell, where are we going?
When you look at race relations in this country, how it affects people, African Americans have really lost their spot. There is no reason why we have as many African American men and women that play on sports teams and in different arenas, rapping, music, fashion, whatever industry it is, and we have not come together as a people to make a statement. Example, when
Bought and sold.
the president called those NFL players sons of bitches, I'm sorry, SOBs. If for one Sunday, all them African Americans players didn't play football, guess what?
Bought and sold, Samson.
We change. You change the narrative. You change the direction and you change the conversation. The question is, we're not ready to change the conversation.
David is bubbling over here. What is it, David?
Well, I think once again that there has been the movement of players, in the NFL to take a knee. I think that
He's saying all of them.
yeah, but there again, that's the issue of how you build solidarity. If you can, I mean, the S storm that came down on Colin Kaepernick, probably
Scared a lot of people.
intimidated, a lot of the players,
Mhm.
and on top of that, what would have protected the black players who were taking the knee would have been protected them in the sense of made it more powerful would have been if there were more white players, European American players that had
Supported them in the process.
Supported them in the process. In
Mhm.
other words, they
Mhm.
would have made it into a solidarity question.
Yeah.
And
I want to jump in
that's-
right quick.
Yeah.
I want to jump in.
These two guys, I don't know
And
what I'm gonna do with them.
I do understand David's point. I do understand people get comfortable and get afraid. But let me bring some history. What about Bloody Sunday? What about if you look during the civil rights era, you had police who put their dogs on our people and they beat them in the streets and they water hosed them and they continue to fight on. They didn't have an excuse. They continue to say, we want this equal. There's a reason why the civil rights came about. So when people say, well, this is my safe haven, but there are people who paid the price for you to have a safe haven. When do we say, wait, we got to stand up for something or we stand up for nothing? So there are people in this country in African Americans who have been killed so we can enjoy the luxuries that we have today. And we have forgotten that. We have forgotten that as a community.
I think
And when
they're
you forget
comfortable.
that, and you may be uncomfortable, but to what point do we have to get you uncomfortable? Oh, I guess until it happens to you.
Yeah. Until it happens, until it becomes personal. It's kind of like my efforts with with my industry, with the beauty and barber industry. Until it started to hit people in their pockets, they didn't feel it, they didn't get it. So I don't want there to be a race war, because I think we those of us that are at this table, we want to bridge the divide. It is our intention to bridge the divide, but I don't want to see the right become more armed, the left become more armed, black people become more armed, white people. I don't want to see this happen. Does it have to come to what Donald Trump is literally trying to manifest before we say no? Like, where does it stop? What do we do?
Well, I think that part of the problem, or big part of the problem, is that the isolation, the geographic isolation that where we live with, which is breaking down, which is eroding. There are far fewer areas of the country that are entirely white
Or black. Yes, you're right.
Because of the civil rights movement, the Fair Housing Act, and all of those, the Voting Rights Act, all of those things that were passed in the middle to 64 to 68 or so, that there is much more communication across racial lines, much more friendship across racial lines, much more conversation. But even so, it is still white people who are the most uncomfortable dealing with this issue, and part of it is because either they want to deny the reality of inequality, in which case it is very difficult for them to have any conversation at all with people of color, because it really just interferes with their perception of reality. They are being called upon to actually change their whole.
That's the thinking and acting white that you talk about.
White, yeah. But also even with people who prize the fact that they get along well with people of color, with black people and other people of color.
Because they have one black friend.
Yeah, because they have one. Yeah, exactly. Or they have committed themselves to this idea of social justice, but without actually considering what it's going to mean for their own status and position in life. And many of them congregating in the Democratic Party are very happy to say, oh, we have a diverse party, but they're not willing to go out and talk to other white people about where their interests lie and why their interests lie in acting in solidarity, as the case of North DeKalb and South DeKalb County, in solidarity with each other. Because except for that even in that top 20% income bracket, there are people who are having difficulties. They may be making all of that money, but it's going right out the door. And for 2/3 of the population of the United States, we know that 2/3 of the people in this country could not find $1,000 if they needed it in the case of an emergency. They just don't have that available. So there's a very good reason for European American people to act in solidarity with the poorest folks that are out there, and not listen to the crap, pardon me, that's coming out of the Republican Party, that we don't need government. You
hear that, Republican?
Well, yeah.
I mean, the thing is that the way that the government is set up, whether it be on the national or the state or the local level is that it works for a very, very small minority of the people. And it provides them with all sorts of incentives. And for everybody else, it provides threats and coercion and fear of losing their jobs,
True.
which makes folks much more tractable, in the face of their employers.
Right. And so let me jump in right quick.
Yeah.
And so when we talk of, and once again, Dave, that's a good point. We also have to look at how Black men are portrayed in the public's eye.
Mhm.
That has a large dealing with how white people view Black.
Scary fellow.
Right. So if we put an image of, and you see more derogatory images of Black men than you do of Black women.
Mhm.
So if I'm a Black woman, I can probably be more easily convinced to assimilate to a white person
Mhm.
because I'm not threatened. And most of the images you see in the media about Black women are non-threatening. But when it comes to Black men, it's a different story. There's a different image. If you ask the average white person, what was the most pleasant image of a Black man you saw, they would probably say Barack Obama.
And what year was that? That was just 8 years ago or
Right.
10 years ago?
So that's the positive image. Where are all the other images that white people see of Blacks?
And let's just say that Barack was, somebody who never got angry, right?
Right.
Always soft-spoken, thoughtful, contradicted all of those stereotypes. And in fact, when he did say something that was just mildly irritated. Remember when Henry Louis Gates got arrested
on his own porch, on his own porch, yeah,
in his own house,
yeah.
And Obama said, that was just downright stupid, right?
Right.
Whoa! I mean,
whoa! How dare you, right?
Right.
Uproar. So even somebody who is as and there's a line from Shakespeare's Hamlet, compare Obama to Trump. Hamlet says about his father compared to his uncle, Hyperion to a satyr. I've always wanted to say that. I've been thinking that
he had his chance now, y'all.
Yeah, for years now.
We have to change the image. And that starts with what we buy, how we put ourselves out there. But once again, it comes back to the African American community. When we see our young people with their pants down, when we see them on Facebook and other social media displaying guns and cursing and doing things, those are the images that white Americans see.
But it's also true that those are the images that, first of all, the media.
Listen, trust me when I say, we need to hold them accountable as well. Trust me.
But this generation, just to kind of defend them in some, this is their self-expression. They feel like, this is how I express myself. This is how I dress, and we've given them so much freedom. Because I have a 19-year-old, and we've given out these young people so much freedom to be whoever they are, and we haven't made them conform to any kind of standards to what they should look. I do like the clean haircuts, and my sons know not to sag. I don't do the sagging, but I mean, I've learned how to not be so rigid in my thinking and allow these young people to kind of tattoos now, like I have no tattoos, but tattoos are, that's like the thing. The fact that I don't have any. Do you have a tattoo?
No.
David, do you have a tattoo? David has no tattoos.
I'm thinking about getting one.
On his neck.
That's in it. Yeah. No,
I will say this, and I guess it comes back to what we value the most.
Yeah.
I do understand we're dealing with a different generation. I
Mhm.
do understand that. And I do understand that things change. I do understand that. However, when you're trying to move forward, we can only give you so much to move forward with.
That's why this next generation is I'm so encouraged by them, because they're like free spirited. They're, they look how they want to look, they do what they want to do, they say what they want to say. And I believe this next electorate is going to just totally be, I think they're going to change the world.
Yeah, there certainly is a tremendous shift that's taking place
Mm-hmm.
with people who are in their late teens to their mid 30s.
Yes.
They have had an entirely different experience about race
Yes.
than even the
Their
40,
grandfathers.
40 or 50, well,
Yeah.
even their 40 and 50-year-olds.
Yes.
And their experience is like the experience in Parkland High School,
Mhm.
where David Hogg, who's been getting attacked
Yes.
over and over again in the right-wing media, particularly on Fox News, and now there is a tremendous backlash against Laura Ingraham,
Mhm.
and all of these other people, because she's been
she retracted.
bullying.
She came back and took all of that back.
So, but the thing is that one of the reasons that these young people look so dangerous, young white people look so dangerous, is because people like Emma Gonzalez, who, I mean, it's kind of hard to say that she's white,
Mhm. What is she? She's probably Latino.
She's I don't know, Venezuela,
Okay,
where her
okay.
folks are from. But,
Mhm. She's with the one with the bald head.
Yeah, she's the one with the.
Yeah, I
with the
love
shape.
it.
But look at what these folks have been saying. They've been
Mhm.
saying, we had a one-day shooting in which 17 people were killed. There are communities out there who have somebody killed every day,
Mhm.
and we're not going to ignore that. We're not going to
Yes.
forget about that. We're not going to think and act white. We're not going to, be in our own shell.
Mhm.
We are acting in solidarity.
Mhm.
And Hogg and others of them are saying, look, 25% of Parkland High School. We talked about this last week about how wealthy that community is.
Yeah.
But 25% of Parkland High School is people of color,
Mhm.
at least.
Mhm.
12 or 15%.
And these kids are
African-American.
friends. Like, these
And
kids
they're
are friends.
friends, yes,
They're sincere about it. They're
Yeah.
not playing. Like, these are our
grew up
friends.
together. They grew
Yeah.
up together. So there's a lot of areas in the suburbs now where this is taking place, and these are very influential kids.
Yeah. So this next generation, you know what?
But
The older generation may not have gotten it right.
Yeah.
We're still struggling in this
Yeah.
generation, but this next generation, I'm encouraged.
Well, the thing is that part of the reason that these kids are, and I want to revise something that I said last week about them being articulate. There are plenty of articulate leaders in Black Lives Matter. They are eloquent. They are powerful speakers.
Yes, they
have themselves together.
Mhm.
They just don't get the air,
Right.
Yep.
and so
And when they do, it's negative. Oh, they're shutting down the highways.
Yeah.
No, they're protesting.
Yeah.
Right,
That's
Samson?
exactly right.
And I'm saying,
So
sometimes
there's
you
a
have
lot of leadership out
Oh, yeah.
there, for African Americans to really, have, be inspired by, right?
And I do agree with that. And sometimes you have to shut down the highway. Sometimes you have to be aggressive.
Yeah.
I want to bring a issue up that I just talked about recently. Some years ago, I was in Chicago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I was in Chicago, and the Black Lives Matter was forming a protest against the young boy that was shot 16 times.
Mm-hmm.
And I went down to the Black Lives Matter office, and I said, "Hey, what's the strategy?" They said, "Well, we're gonna get our troops together and march in front of City Hall." City Hall? I said, "Yeah, we're gonna send the mayor a message." I said, "Okay."
Yeah.
I said, "Can I make a suggestion?" They said, "Sure." I said, "Why don't you take your people and go to Michigan Avenue?" Why we go to Michigan Avenue? Michigan Avenue is the financial district of Chicago. You shut Michigan Avenue down, guess what? The media will come to you. You have mass media. When you shut down that money, see, one thing when you talk about race, we also have to talk about that money. And as Dave mentioned earlier, them campaigns are financed by top people. When you shut that money down, we don't contribute to campaigns. But when you shut money down, things change. The question is, are we willing to shut the money down? You take 1,000 people to Michigan Avenue and cross the street and stop. Guess what you just did? You just stopped them cash registers. Ding, 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 ding. People in the store is going to come out. What's going on out here? Now you're taking the business away. The NFL players, if they would have said, we're not playing. Guess what? No broadcasting of games.
But this is where we've been conditioned. That's why I said we as a people, we still have work to do because we've been conditioned to be, afraid and scared to do things, passive.
Yeah,
so we still
no,
have work to do.
yeah,
we can't put it all on the white.
Oh no, I am. Understand this, me, Samson Burrell. I do believe in coming to the table with a peace agreement to say, hey, let's deal with these issues and let's work them out. I do believe that.
Yeah.
I believe in bringing poison as well. So when the peace agreement don't work, we're gonna get the poison.
Y'all better watch Samson.
But no, you have to come and address the issue and try to bring it on a level ground.
Yeah. But here's the thing, and we've talked about this a number of times about how we really need to think in terms of different messages and different ways of the way that a black listener is listening to our conversation and a white listener is listening. So we really have to think about the fact that Black people are afraid of things outside of their community.
That is true.
The police, and other big institutions that come down on them and that treat them unfairly. I think that most white people are afraid of other white people and what other white people think.
I never thought that before. I never thought that before, but that's a good point.
Yeah. So in the white community, it's really a matter of being brave, not in the face of cops, but in the face of your next door neighbor or your, the person that you work with, in your colleague at work.
Because is it true once you go black?
Or your family,
Is it true, David? Once you go black,
you can't go back.
You can't go back.
Well, once you stop thinking and acting right, once you stop, because I'm not. You guys are all joking with me about that maybe I'm black or something like that. I mean, I've had Black people, say that in all seriousness to me. I mean, come on, folks.
He gets it, y'all. He gets it.
But the thing that I'm saying about this is that. Yes, once you stop thinking and acting right, and that doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen, by somebody waving a magic wand. It's hard work. It's hard work for people who have been raised thinking and acting white to get outside of that frame of reference.
And trust Black people. Trust Black people. We are not what the media has portrayed us to be. Like Samson just said.
The other part of it is you've got to trust white people too.
That's true.
Yeah.
You've got to trust that the people who you are closest to have underneath it all good hearts. That they're basically want to do the right thing, and that what you're saying to them, white people out there, I'm talking to you. What you're saying to them,
David.
what you're saying to them is in their interests, and if you are not convinced of that yourself, it's going to be very hard to convince the people around you, your neighbors, your friends, your family, and your coworkers. So you've got to get to thinking about that, and that means getting into conversation with people of color, but not leaving it there. Mm-hmm. That conversation has got to be brought to these other European Americans, as I call them, who are around you. You've got a responsibility to them, because otherwise we're going to they're going to be listening to the loudest bullying voices around. And guess who those folks are? The loud bullies,
extremists.
who are really now openly preaching race war.
Right.
And that's who we need to focus our attention on. That you white people out there, or European Americans who are trying to stop thinking and acting white and act in right relationship to people of color around you. That's who we're responsible for. We're responsible for them. If there's a race war, it's our fault, not black people or anybody else. It's our fault. So get woke.
David is woke, y'all.
And to add to what David just said, that's why there's an issue in DeKalb County between North and South DeKalb. We have allowed people to say this is a race issue, and they have made it a divided race issue. When you allow someone to do something, you basically are giving them the power. And that's what we've done in DeKalb County.
And they haven't addressed it. It's like an elephant in the room.
Exactly.
It's like it's there. You can feel it. You know it. And nobody will say there's an elephant in the room.
And remember, when we're talking about power, there's two different kinds of power. Mm-hmm. There's power over people and there's power with people.
Correct.
And that really is the difference between solidarity and getting white people to have the privilege of being able to lord it over people who are less powerless than they are.
But they feel like they're going to lose something, David. That's like part of it.
That's the issue. What are they actually giving up? What are they, when they're so-called giving up? I don't, that I don't use that language, but privilege is not a benefit. It's a way of controlling white working people, whether they be making $100,000 a year or $30,000 a year. It's a way of controlling them so that we relinquish our power with other people in exchange for a mess of porridge, to use the biblical, I'm forgetting everybody's name here.
He's on a roll. He's on a roll.
The birthright for a mess of porridge, right? It's an illusion. Having power over. So we don't really have the power. We're just deputized, by the people who really have the power. And what we do is we relinquish our real power when we're when we fall for that kind of poison bait. So that's where so the North DeKalb people think, I live in a nice house and I have a pretty good job and I have insurance and my kids are going to go to college, and I don't need to worry about those folks in South DeKalb who are living in apartment complexes and working 3 different jobs and when the Republican legislature says, well, we want to take away food stamps, that doesn't have anything to do with me, right? If these people get something more, they're going to compete with me, right?
My thing is, they should realize that it relieves the burden of what they have to do. Like, sometimes the Republicans and white people say they're paying so much in taxes, and it becomes so much that they have to do. But if you give other people opportunities, we become a part of the economy, so we can definitely put more into it. So it's like, why would you take anything away from these people? What you would want to do is strengthen them, give them opportunities, strengthen the middle class.
And then think about this. There's millions and millions of people who are retiring every year and going on Social Security.
Yes.
And larger and larger proportion of the people who are fewer and fewer people who are working are supporting more and more people who are retired. Now, if all of those people are making, minimum wage and working in jobs, low productivity, how the heck are they going to support these millions and millions of baby boomers that are, if you're a baby boomer, and you should be saying, oh my God, I want to pay more of taxes to support education, right?
I want to make sure that
Because
these people are going to be
Gonna
around.
have a high productivity jobs.
Yes, so they
they'll
can
be
put
able to
money into
support
the
me.
system.
Yeah,
Yeah, like I
yeah.
want to make sure that
Yeah.
my next generation is well equipped. They have jobs. They're stable, because when it's time for me to take my little Social Security, I want to be able to take it.
Yeah, yeah. So that all of these.
So there's no privilege. It's a benefit if
Yeah.
they can see that by helping communities of color, helping
And
more
it's-
impoverished communities,
Yeah.
putting more opportunities, more resources into those communities, it
Yeah.
helps them.
Yeah, and it's a hidden cost. It's a hidden cost of racial privilege to say, oh, I don't want my taxes going to school. Now they're saying, I mean, I guess there are things that are being done, or there are exemptions for people who are over 75. They don't have to pay their school taxes anymore once you reach 75 or something like that. I think that would be that would be one of the taxes that I would want to continue, right?
Mm.
Because and if you don't pay taxes on that, you ought to be doing some volunteering.
And my thing is this with DeKalb County, because we have about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Actually, we have 5 minutes left in this broadcast. So my thing with DeKalb County is that I want North DeKalb to understand that it is our responsibility to take care of all DeKalb. Like, I want North DeKalb to not feel like they've created such an island. They're so isolated that we don't have to worry about all DeKalb. We are
And
DeKalb. We
not
are
only
one
that,
DeKalb.
Not only that, but there's plenty of South DeKalb that's in North DeKalb, as we were talking about before the
Mhm.
broadcast. There's a whole areas of North DeKalb, like what we were saying. I went out running last Saturday on Winners Chapel and over to where Peachtree Industrial is the highway, and down that way to Tilly Mill. There are dozens of large apartment complexes
Mhm.
over there, mostly Hispanic.
Mhm.
The whole neighborhood is Hispanic.
So empowering people, North DeKalb, empowering all of DeKalb County, it alleviates the tax burden. It could raise our property value in DeKalb County as a whole, right? Because that's a problem with DeKalb, South DeKalb, that the property value is nowhere near what the property value is on the north side. But what we want to do is create a better, stronger DeKalb. So we need to make sure that it becomes something that we address countywide.
And
We can't be like away from this.
The only way to get the redistribution of income
Mhm.
from the billionaires who have been concentrating the wealth and income in this society for the past 40 years
Mhm.
or more is for the rest of us to think of ourselves as being in the same boat.
Because we
Because
are in the same boat. It's not
Because
think
if
we
there-
are.
If there isn't solidarity, we're never going to be able to have the power to take, reclaim all of this power that has been, concentrated in the hands of the very, very, very wealthy in this country.
Like, you can't get an A and I get an F and we expect to get a passing grade. We're just going to get just a C. So we have to make sure that we're doing things that bridge the divide here in South DeKalb. I'm gonna let you take it home, brother. We got about 3 minutes.
Once again, this conversation was always good.
Yeah.
And once I want to piggyback on the topic, the race issue, not only in this country, but in this county. And those are some real issues. And we hope that today we start to open. So basically the door is open. The question is, how far are we willing to open the door and discuss the issue and come up with some resolutions to these issues?
Cross the threshold.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep.
In order for this county to move forward, or even this country, we have to address the race issues. That's the elephant in the room.
Mm-hmm. And we all win when we do. We all win, right? We all win. North DeKalb, you win. South DeKalb, you win. DeKalb County, we win. Like, how hard is this? This is like, I feel like I feel like we're the smartest people in the room. David, it's always a pleasure. Samson, we're going to continue these conversations. We're going to do this every week, guys. We're going to continue to talk about the things that divide us here in North to South and South DeKalb? How do we create a better DeKalb? And as a future legislator, I want to be a bridge builder. I want to make sure that we're addressing all of DeKalb's problems, all of Gwinnett's problems, all of Fulton, all of every county here in Georgia. I want to be a resource and I want to be a bridge builder, and I want us to see some positive change. We're all here together. Georgia, we shouldn't be competing with each other for resources. Let's compete with some other states. You know, let's not always be on the bottom when it comes to education, healthcare, transportation. We shouldn't always be on the bottom. We have a lot of good work we could be doing here, but you have to elect people who know how to have these hard conversations, who's not intimidated, who's not scared, because I ain't never scared. That's a song. David, you know that song? No, he doesn't know that song. He doesn't know that
I'm
song.
so lame.
Bone Crusher.
That's my song.
I'm going to find that song, y'all, and I'm going to let David hear I Ain't Never Scared by Bone Crusher. But I just want to thank you guys for joining us. We're at the top of the hour. I love you. We appreciate you. Again, my name is Tamara Johnson-Shealy. I am your candidate for Senate District 40. Get out and vote. April 30th is early voting. The election day is May 22nd. I have a primary to win, and I have a general election to take care of. So I've been running this race. This is my third time. I am so on fire, and I am so ready. So thank you. We love you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Samson.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Have a good one, everybody. See you soon.